All right, Mahyar. Who do we have here today with us?
So with us today we have Greg.
I'm Greg Smith. I'm a registered physiotherapist in Vancouver, BC. My background, I have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology from University of British Columbia, and then I also did my master's in physiotherapy at UBC. Prior to going to school, I actually was a professional soccer player in Germany, and then I was a varsity athlete at UBC playing soccer and rugby. So I've got a passion for sport. I definitely, my caseload here is a lot of sport-specific patients. We're looking at how to get people back fit, healthy, ready for both sport, general activity, and anything in between. Now I'm doing CrossFit. I'm skiing. One of my major passions is surfing. So a pretty dynamic and different sort of approach to a lot of your sort of physiotherapy type exercises. Definitely come from an active rehab approach as opposed to a passive approach to getting people better. So really interested, really happy to be here, excited to look at some different exercises and how we can basically help put out some content that'll help people optimize what they're doing already, or maybe even get them interested in trying something new, getting involved with different exercises, different sports as well.
And I've been doing personal training for the past 10 years, been doing CrossFit for the past 10 years as well. My background, I did kickboxing for about 8 years. I've been coaching weightlifting for the past 8 years, and I've been dealing with clients that go through rehab, prehab for their sports. And
Over the years, you've been dealing with injuries. How do you feel like physiotherapy has really helped you in that journey?
lots, yeah. I've been through a couple of injuries that whenever I get to a point that I can't find the way to treat myself, I usually go to a physiotherapist to get that help that I don't have the knowledge for, so they can help me to get better. Also, I can use that knowledge to also help my client to get better at their injuries or get better at their sports as well.
And this is also really common kind of across the board. That's why you would see doctors that have their own doctors, right? I mean, it's the same thing. Physios go and see other physios. PTs see other PTs. Is because it's really hard to self-assess and basically look at your own kind of programming and know exactly what am I missing, right? So in certain cases, it's really good to have that external opinion and it's some different expertise or some different approaches to then allow you to build off of what you're already doing, help you get back to or perform even better with that as well.
Today we're gonna talk about some skiing essentials. Greg and I came up with a few exercises, 9 to be precise, that we're gonna go over each. We're gonna explain, go in depth with each one of them, and then hopefully they can help you guys to be better on the slopes and ski more confident.
So looking at the Copenhagen side plank, we're going to be looking to basically stabilize and build strength through the core, as well as all down that kind of medial chain. We're going to be looking at kind of adductor magnus, adductor longus, gracilis. We're actually going to get a little maybe semitendinosis into the hamstring group as well with that. So we're really trying to build strength through our inner thighs, essentially. Also be looking at how to build strength through the outer, out of the hips, the kind of lateral movement, but definitely in terms of building strength through our hips, stabilizing our joints, stabilizing through the core, hugely important in terms of making deep turns and control through these movements.
And then if you're an average skier like me, if you've been on the slopes, you probably feel like your inner thighs are about to explode, like you might even feel sore the day after or maybe a week after. So these following exercises are going to help you to get over that feeling and be more stronger and stable.
Okay, perfect. So we're looking at the Copenhagen side plank. We got Mayhem here kind of demonstrating what would be almost like a regressed version of this particular exercise. What we're looking at doing here is we're going to be doing a side plank, kind of working that lateral body, looking at stabilizing through our kind of deep transverse stabilizers, all through our back muscles as well. We're kind of getting down into our hip as well. So as Mayhem actually lifts up here, brings this bottom leg off, We're going to be focusing on drawing that belly button in towards our spine. We're going to be shifting our hips forward slightly so we keep that nice line along here. Hand can go onto the side of the hip here. Shoulder's going to rotate back. We really want to make sure that that shoulder is positioned and that elbow's down below. In this position here, you can see Mayhem starting to shake a little bit as well. Doesn't take long to get that actual activation happening through there and getting your nervous system to adapt. This is a particularly challenging exercise, so this is kind of version number 1 that you would be wanting to look at, where you have a bent knee and stabilized on the bench from here. Looking at probably starting with like either a 20-second hold, maybe a 30-second hold, trying to build your capacity from there. Coming back down.
Fuck.
Perfect. So just before Mayhem gets up into what will be the more advanced or the progressed version of the Copenhagen side plank, we'll talk about a couple of different pieces. So again, coming back to muscles being worked here, we're really focusing in on stabilizing and developing a nice strong trunk. Once we kind of actually build that strength from the core and stabilize from there, that provides us a strong foundation to then have the other pieces to the puzzle, our hips, our legs, our arms, to move off of that. We don't want to be dissipating any sort of strength or strength production. If we're moving our leg and our back is moving, our hips are moving in a different way, we're unable to produce that force effectively. So we want to kind of build that stability, that strength through the trunk first, and then build off of that and make sure that we're having that sort of strength through the hips and the legs going down, especially for our skiing here. So as Mayhem now comes up into that sort of plank position, you can see the advanced version here is going to be actually down below the knee. And you can see as well, a key piece of this puzzle is actually making sure that that elbow is positioned just under the shoulder. There will be a little bit of a sweet spot, so you can kind of play around with that, but if you go too far out or too far in, you will put undue stress on that shoulder. So kind of play with that. You can see here Mayhem starting to shake a little bit more again, so we're going to bring that lower leg up a little higher. We're going to draw that belly button in, and we're going to bring your hips forward just a little bit more. We really want to find that nice long position, and then we're going to come back down from there as well.
If you guys have problems balancing yourself, going on your fist is going to make you less balanced. So what I tell people is to get your palm, spread your fingers, so you have more points of contact to the floor. So when you're popping up to that knee, you have more balance, more surface to base off.
And another piece to the puzzle too to think about as well, depending on if someone has like a knee injury, you probably want to start in that, obviously, that regressed position that you're just above that knee. You can have it in a flexed position if it's more comfortable. You can, in this position too, even have it straight and come even closer into the bench to begin with as well. Something to think about if you are training someone or you're working with someone or you are someone yourself that does have any sort of knee pain. If you do come down to this foot position, you'll put a lot of stress through that knee, which is fine, and tissues will adapt, and we don't want to stray away from something and building towards that. But if you do have a sensitive knee to begin with, you probably want to kind of play with something a little bit higher first. You'll still get really good benefit from the exercise, but you do want to kind of be aware of that to begin with, as opposed to putting too much strain through there right off the top.
And then trust me, if you're doing it right, 20 to 30 seconds will do the job. You don't need to do anything longer than that.
Yeah, so if we're looking at kind of where one might start, I would say start with the thigh position for Copenhagen side plank. Start there, start with a 20 to 30 second hold, try and do 3 to 4 on each side. That's a great place to start. It's definitely one that you can easily mix into your exercise routine. And if you go through that, it's only going to add it in, maybe 4 or 5 minutes overall if you're going back and forth, because you only really need maybe 30 seconds to a minute rest in between. So add that in, and you'll start to see definitely you can bulletproof your inner thigh, that strength through there, and build off of it.
Just one more thing, with like every single exercise that we do, consistency is the key. So if you're doing it one day or doing it a couple times a week, and then you take 3 weeks off and you go back to it, it's not gonna give you the preferred results. So you want to be consistent, stick with it at least twice a week, and build on that.
Yeah, that's huge. Definitely. Very good point. Very good point.
All right, on the topic of skiing, our next exercise is gonna be Bulgarian split squats. I'm gonna go over how to set up for it, what's the best ideal position with your shins are, and what are the restrictions for it. So first thing first, Greg is in that position right now. So when you're setting up for it, I'm just going to get him to stand up for a second. So first, if you have good balance, you're just gonna prop your back foot on the bench while balancing yourself on that opposite leg. He's gonna lower himself to a full squat, which is a couch stretch, which is the best stretch for your hip flexors if you're feeling tight over there, and also helps you to loosen up your lower back. So ideally, when you're doing your split squats, you want that shin angle to be perpendicular to the floor. So you don't want to drive your knee too far forward. That's gonna put stress on your knee. You wanna stay almost vertical to the floor. From there, what he does, he goes straight up to that extension, using that hip to drive himself up, and then on the lowering portion, he's gonna come down slow, controlled, and then back up.
Perfect. So this is a fantastic exercise. Again, even just getting into this position, I often give this to a lot of patients, just in terms of trying to open up that kind of rec fem, all of your quad muscles through here. If you've got tight hips, if you work a desk job, this is going to be a great exercise. You're watching TV at the end of your day after you've actually been working, sitting at a desk all day. You're putting 6, 8 hours sitting down. A lot of people are still doing that, right? And there's no way around it. So, okay, what can we do to mitigate some of that tension, that tightness, that adaptive shortening we might see? This is a fantastic exercise for that. All you really want to focus on here, again, so drawing that belly button in, trying to almost tilt your hips back. If you imagine your pelvis as like a bowl of water, you're trying to tip the water out the back. So what that's going to do is immediately bring stretch into that anterior sort of hip location through here. You're going to find quite an intense stretch, and that's a fantastic place to start. Some people might not be able to actually get down into a Bulgarian split squat to begin with. So getting that stretch, getting that mobility first, and then building into that exercise and that strengthening.
Primer to be able to do that movement.
Exactly.
Just one more thing, as he mentioned, you want to draw that belly button forward. You want to avoid arching your back when you're dropping in that position, because the second you arch your back, you take the tension off those hips. So again, draw the belly button forward, squeeze your butt cheeks forward as hard as you can to get more stretch on that front side of it. Rep scheme wise, we usually do about 8 to 12 reps. We do them controlled. We're not gonna go fast. We don't drop down with speed. We do lower slow. We come up with a normal speed. Just one more thing I wanna add. If you have pain at the front of your knee, if you have any tendonitis or tendinopathy, you wanna start with the iso hold. The iso hold is similar to those Bulgarian split squats, but all you do, you're maintaining that position. So let's say Greg goes down and he feels pain right at about this level. So he's gonna come up an inch, so you don't feel any pain there. That's where you wanna start. And then the better you get at it, you get lower and lower. And ideally, once you get that full range of motion, you go to that hip just at 90 degree and then back.
And another kind of talking about that as well, if we're thinking about, okay, if this person has tendonitis, knee pain, something of that nature as well, they might even start, hey, you know what? I'm just going to start with an iso hold lunge first, right? You know, build up towards that sort of Bulgarian if you're finding that they're still getting pain. If you're like, hey, you know what? I can't modify the depth of the squat. I can't find that sweet spot without pain. If it's already painful, we just got to change that. Again, change that load ever so slightly. Again, like you mentioned, the further that knee comes over the toes, it's not necessarily bad for the knee, it's just going to load the knee further. The more we get further back and put pressure through kind of midfoot and heel, the less it's going to put pressure through that knee, just in terms of the mechanics. So not necessarily one versus the other being bad or good, it's just you have to understand that it's going to change the load on the tissues in the knee. So generally speaking, individuals that load further forward have a better tolerance of the tissues versus someone who might find more comfort loading through this position. It's a really good place to start.
Just one more thing I want to add to that. When you're going down in that front leg, you want to make sure that you're not losing that arch that you created at the beginning of the movement. So the second I go down and I feel my knees collapsing and I lose my arch, all that pressure goes to the opposite side and more load on the joint versus the muscles that we're going to strengthen.
Yeah, definitely. Going to end up basically loading that sort of medial meniscus or that inner portion of the joint a lot more. If we have that, what you're referencing there a little bit more is that almost internal tibial rotation. And then if we can stabilize through the foot and through the hip a little bit more, we'll be able to maintain a better joint position. And that's something, again, if we're thinking about, okay, why is this an exercise that's good for skiing? A lot of that sort of positioning is really important. A lot of people will recognize just this overall sort of lunge position for telemarking. Telemarking is a obviously type of skiing that really involves a deep lunge repetitively. So this is an even more important exercise for someone who might be telemark skiing. But definitely in terms of the control around the hip and the ankle and the balance component, those aspects make it, that's why it's on the list. That's why it's definitely one of our most important skiing exercises. All right, so the next exercise that we're going to be looking at is going to be a single leg balance. In our Skiing Essential series here, the importance of a single leg balance is bar none. We need to be sure that we're loading through that leg when we're making our turns. A lot of the time we are obviously on two skis, both legs, but when we are turning, especially say right leg is going to be loaded when we're making a left turn, our left leg is going to be loaded when we're making a right turn. And quite often we're putting pretty much all of our weight through that outside leg, especially as we are starting to ski faster or a tighter turn. We need to be very kind of solid and dialed in on that. So the importance of that and what we're looking at is okay, can we maintain leg position? Can we kind of feed back and get that kind of neuromuscular connection to the appropriate kind of pieces to the puzzle? Can we maintain a knee position, ankle, foot position, in through the hip? Can we stabilize when we kind of encounter something that we didn't expect? If there is that, what we call like a perturbation or something of that nature, can we adapt quick enough and stabilize again, or is that going to result in a fall? So obviously when you're skiing groomers, you kind of know what to expect or anticipate. That's when you're maybe skiing a little faster, you're kind of loading into your turns a little heavier, a little tighter. But then when you're starting to kind of go off-piste, or you're into some, say, powder, ice, death cookies, as some people refer to them, they're all over the place, right? I mean, we've had a pretty dry and icy start to the season here in Western Canada. We just got some powder, so we're going to see a bit of both across the season generally, and as we get into the spring, we're going to see that slush. We're going to see those conditions change again. So making sure that your body feeds back and you connect to that quickly and you can adapt is going to be essential. So what we're going to look at is kind of where to start with your balance, some different ways to kind of influence different pieces to the puzzle of your balance, and then kind of get creative with some different things that kind of make it more interesting. If you are, say, someone that has very good balance and is looking for something a little bit more advanced, we'll kind of progress up towards that and look at it as well. Okay? So Mayhem, let's get you here kind of all lined up. Whichever leg you prefer to practice on to begin with, let's get you set up with that. So key piece to the puzzle here, we're going to make sure that when we're practicing our balance, we want to, say, maintain optimal within reason. We'll build off of that, and we can always challenge our system, our muscles, and everything else in a different position, but we're going to start with our basic sort of say, anatomical position as best we can. So we're going to try and get foot straight forward. We're going to have our knee or our knee cap in line with not necessarily our big toe, but the next two toes over. So we're kind of nice and central. And then from there as well, we want to keep our pelvis level. Our core is tight. We're going to kind of maintain that position. We're going to make sure that that hip is in line with our knee, in line with our foot. So if you can maintain that, if you can't, then you might need a dowel to allow you to practice that position and start to work in front of a mirror to get that feedback to say, okay, that's actually where I feel like my hips engage, or that's where I can feel like my foot is starting to actually maintain. And you'll find that in some cases, one side's going to be significantly better than the other. If you've had a previous injury, if you have had back pain, or you have had hip pain or something of that nature, absolutely, you'll see a lot more sort of torsion or rotation through one side. You might not be able to stabilize as effectively or even feel the muscles around your hip or your leg as well. So Again, we can almost in this case see Mayham kind of shifting his body weight over a little bit, and we want to kind of maintain that sort of position there, keeping that pelvis nice and level, keeping that knee, hip in line with that foot as well. But that's looking like nice kind of positioning overall as a good place to start. So if this feels really easy for you, then what you're going to be looking to do, and where I usually get people to start with, is close your eyes. Taking away our visual system forces us to use basically our joint proprioception, or those basically there are fibers and there are actually receptors in our joints that feed back to our brain rapidly to tell us where our foot or ankle is, or in this case even the hip, the knee, where it is in space with relation to the rest of the body. So it's kind of a form of balance, but it's just kind of a nuanced way of saying, okay, we're training certain receptors to have that feedback more effectively. So if we're looking at that, by taking the eyes away, you can see already Mayhem's going to have a bit more of a shift to it. It's going to challenge him in a different way. We do actually focus and use our eyes and our visual system a lot when it comes to balance. So this is a really nice one. You'll find that certain people will have a lot of challenge with this. Actually, when our visual system and our inner ear are disconnected or not well aligned, that's when we end up with seasickness. So by removing our eyes, we're focusing in on that inner ear and our proprioception in our joints. So there's different ways we can play with that, but that's a nice one. You can see it's challenging right off the hop. You'll get that kind of feedback. Get really good at that first, then we can start to kind of build off of other ways to play with it. So the next thing we can do is we can maintain our eyes open in this case, but we can go with something like a soft support. Some people will use a Bosu ball. Some people, they're actually balance pads. In this case, we're just actually in a CrossFit gym, so we're going to be using an ab mat. And we're just going to be coming down, and we'll get Mayham to stand on there. You can play with different directions, but anything that has a little bit of forgiveness to it. I actually often recommend people at home, if you are progressing to this level, is actually to use a couch cushion. Not necessarily a pillow, because a pillow will be a little bit too compressive. You won't get enough of that feedback, but generally a firmer couch cushion will give you just enough that, again, you have to really focus on that foot position, that control, maintaining that position. If that starts to feel easy, then we'll get Mayham to close his eyes, which we now are really challenging multiple systems at the same time. Very, very challenging. If you're taking away, again, that feedback of the proprioception of a strong base of support, as well as the visual system, you're really getting that inner ear to tell you where you are, and you start to kind of challenge it in different ways. So you can play with it, right? I mean, there's lots of different things. Very, very simple, easy access, things you can do at home, things you can do mix in. So if you're like, hey, you know what? I'm just not very good at single leg balance. I just don't do that. As a skier, this is huge. If you're an older skier especially, the essential is just get solid on a single leg balance. And the reason for that, as we age, our systems, our balance systems are impacted. And it's one of the things that we do see as everyone ages, that are typically we see more falls, we see more tripping, we see all these different kind of pieces to the puzzle. So if you are a senior or a super senior and stuff, and you're skiing and you're active and you're out there still, even more reason to practice this either in pre-season or add it to your routine right away, because it is a big piece of the puzzle and it's definitely worth your while. Okay, so again, keeping things interesting. What we're going to do, we'll remove this, we'll come back. If we want to kind of incorporate some core component to this as well, we're going to get Mayhem single leg balancing again, and we're just going to do a kettlebell pass. We pass it around, we're going to get into a nice controlled, go around one way, go around the next, and again, on that single leg balance, it's just going to challenge him in a slightly different way, stabilizing through the abdominals, keeping those core nice and tight, but you're also seeing a lot of movement through that leg now. He's now having to just challenge it in a different way, which will allow his foot, his ankle, and his hip to really be using those smaller muscles, those stabilizers, to kind of find that position again and maintain that neutral, because that's the key. We really want to know where that neutral position is, that optimal position, and be able to train those muscles to pull you back to that when in doubt or when something does change, okay? The next piece, Something similar at home, if you want to kind of get creative and something a little bit more engaging. Often I'll use this with athletes that are coming back off an ankle sprain or something of that nature too. We're going to be looking at a balance with a throw and a catch. And we're just, again, making it look really easy for Mayhem here, but if I start to make it a little bit more challenging for him, he's going to have to look and move around on that knee now, move it off of that hip a little bit more. So he has to kind of balance and control. And then even making that harder, we'll get him onto an unstable surface. So he's got that control aspect, and now he's going to be focusing off on something else. So again, if you're skiing down the slopes, something comes up or you see a friend and you're distracted, you're getting that feedback and you're making sure you get that control all the way through that. So different things that you can be trying, different kind of pieces to the puzzle, but really when we're looking at single leg balance, it's an absolute essential. I don't think there's anything else that could be possibly as important as this, depending on obviously age and athletic ability, but anything's kind of single leg is going to be a huge kind of piece to the puzzle, especially injury preventative wise as well.
It's one of those few movements that you don't really need to go to the gym for it.
Yeah.
Like just find the place, find the cushion, find the pillow, and then go to town.
Exactly. I often will get people just say, in terms of building habits, you want to tie it off to something. So I'll say, hey, you know what? Just do a little bit of balance while you brush your teeth. You know, every day you're brushing your teeth. Maybe you have your foam that's readily available as you do it with your brushing your teeth. You just get that feedback, and that way you just kind of get into that routine. You have it tied off to something that you can do consistently. You'll find it makes a big difference, and pretty quickly too. I've had people within a week, they're like standing there, eyes closed, trying to find their balance, and then within a week they're like, hey, you know what, like come back, and boom. It's just that they've got that system, right? We're really training, not necessarily building strength. We're really just optimizing how our nervous system kind of connects with one another, and it's that just what you need is just repetition of that for sure. All right.
All right, guys, continuing on our skiing essential series, we're starting with series of lunges. First, we're gonna start with lunge pail off. The way we do this movement, you're just gonna go into a split stance. Your back foot is on your toe, just like that. It's slightly turned in, so you have more balance. Same with your front foot, it's fully flat. Again, same things here, slightly turned in, so you have more balance. The second you start turning your feet out, you're gonna lose balance and it's gonna fall over. So that's your start position. You have a band set up right at your sternum. Go straight to there. So all he does, staying in that split position, is gonna press the band forward, controlled, and pulling it back. All you wanna think about when you're doing this movement is to keep your trunk stable. So the second he loosens up that band, the band's gonna pull him and he's gonna lose tension. So all that tension goes right through your core. It's avoiding you to turn, to twist. So that way, it's gonna build up stability right in your trunk. What you can do, you do 15 to 20 reps on one side, you flip over to the opposite side, similar thing, 15 to 20. Just like so. And Greg's gonna add a few pointers to this. Okay.
Yeah, so as we're maintaining this sort of position, you can play with the depth of the lunge depending on how that feels for you. If you have knee pain, you're probably going to want to stay up a little higher. You can even modify that to kind of come into a neutral position where you're actually, say practicing your ski stance a little bit more and just kind of keeping a neutral position. I do find that getting into the lunge is going to challenge your quads, your rec fem, your stabilizers through the hip a little bit more. It's going to incorporate some balance a little bit more into our split squat position. But the deeper you go, depending, again, on the type of skiing you do, say if you are telemarking or something of that nature, then absolutely you should be practicing your Palloff sort of stabilizers down nice and deep. If you're, say, a traditional skier where you're not necessarily getting quite as deep on your turns, you might be up here and just getting really solid through there. You can make it a little bit more dynamic if you want to come up and down as you stabilize and add that sort of lunge. You're going to be able to stabilize through the core, build that sort of trunk stability through the hips, that control a lot more as well. All right, so the next exercise in our Skiing Essentials series here is going to be the lateral lunge. And we're going to take you through a few different versions of this, kind of looking at progressions through, and you can kind of find which one is at your level, and then look to kind of build off of that. So the reason we're going with a lateral lunge is obviously with skiing, a lot of our movements is quite lateral production force. So we want to build that sort of hip stabilizer strength. We want to build that glute med, glute min. We want to have some rotation, so our rotators, kind of piriformis, these sort of muscles, we want to be able to kind of control with that. So we want to build strength through there. We want to build control through those movements. We want to also start with kind of slower movements to begin with, get comfortable with those. And again, if we're looking to say build more strength or endurance, we might be looking at a slow or a hold type of exercise versus if we want to develop power, if we're really trying to come out of a turn hard and explode out of that turn, we might be looking to kind of speed that up a little bit more. So we'll look at some kind of different pieces to that puzzle as we go through here. So we have got Mayhem starting with a relatively narrow base of support, and we're just going to kind of get him to cue this and feel the muscles in the right places before we start to move off of that. So as he shifts his weight and bends his left knee, he's going to sit his hip back, and he's going to really kind of focus in and try and feel the kind of glute hip stabilizers through this kind of outer complex of that hip, and then he's going to push off that middle foot and come back, and again he's going to sit into that other side, and then he's going to push off, drive across. So really looking at, again, you can play with the width of your feet, but you do want to kind of just work on, can I feel that glute muscle firing and come across, and can I feel those muscles? So you want to sit into it, you want to feel a bit of a stretch, you want to feel that activation. As that gets more comfortable and you're like, hey, yeah, okay, I know where I'm feeling that muscle, I know how to engage that muscle, I can keep my core engaged, I can keep my pelvis nice and level, then we're going to go a little wider with our feet. Now, same thing again. We want to kind of sit across. We can see that not necessarily in skiing are we going to have our feet this wide, but we are quite often going to see this sort of position. Obviously, we're going to be putting it more laterally as we're making a turn, and that foot's going to be closer, but this is definitely a familiar position for any sort of skier as we get down there. So we want to be building into that. We can load this by getting a little bit further. Again, if we go further with this, we're actually looking at kind of building a bit more mobility. We're trying to get more comfortable, deeper into those hips, deeper into that stretch. Really nice way to build strength and mobility. If we got Mayhem to hold that position, right, we could start to build a little bit of that sort of quad endurance, hip endurance, that sort of strength through that lower leg. We're actually going to be obviously loading a lot through that knee and through that hip, so we can build that endurance through there. As we hold it longer, we'll get a little bit of that shake, that little bit of that feedback, and then we can kind of come back out of that as well. So it's looking good in terms of that movement pattern. Now, if we wanted to say, build off of this and make it a little bit more dynamic, what we could do is we could have him explode out of that onto the other side and come back out. So hold and come out quick. Hold, come out quick. Boom. Load and shift. Load and shift. Again, so we're kind of now creating a movement where we're deep into that position, we're getting that muscle prepped, and then we're also exploding out, trying to get hard out of our turns and build onto that as well. So as you can also kind of progress from here, if we were to start to actually look at jumping from side to side, we could turn that into almost like a lateral bound, and that makes it even further more explosive. So we kind of hop and get that control. Good. Try again. So coming across, loading, and then hop to the other side, load and control. So we're trying to maintain a nice knee-hip position, loading through the hips, we're coming across, right? And as we start to build this, I mean, quite a people will even call this a skater lunge or a skater hop. And we're just trying to get that control. And you can see here, Mayhem's struggling a little bit with that overcompensation. So when he comes across, he's got to really sit into that hip a little bit more and try and keep that pelvis nice and level. And we can kind of build off of that. But those are some of our progressions, starting from a very basic sort of just activation and control and more of like a feel exercise, building into some mobility, some endurance, some power, and then even into almost like not quite a plyometric, but more of an explosive power exercise, develop that strength through that, that lateral hip complex.
All right, guys, another exercise in our skiing essentials. We got the single leg wall sit. Obviously, there are progressions for this as well, for people who have knee pain, for people who don't have the mobility to get low. So we're gonna start with the easiest one, and I'm gonna go over the harder and harder progressions. The first one, before you start the wall sit, you wanna make sure your hips are even. So when you're standing by the wall, you don't wanna tilt your hip to one side to lose balance, just like that. So you wanna, first thing first, you wanna make sure that hip is in one line. Belly button tucked in. From there, you have balance on both feet. But what you're gonna do slowly, without moving the hip, you're gonna slowly take weight off of one of your foot. Just like that. So as you saw, his hips did not move at all. So the only thing that moved was the foot. So what are you guys gonna do now? Focus on that knee positioning. You don't want it to be too far in. The second that goes in, all the pressure goes right into your hip. So we're focusing on keeping that pressure right on that quad. That's your skiing stance. So when you're bending, when you're taking turns, that's mainly put on your quad. So that's what we're gonna do for this part. If you wanna make it harder, you're gonna slide down lower. The lower you get, the more strength you build. You rarely get into this position for skiing, but you wanna have that strength in those lower positions so you have the ability, so when you get to those deep turns, you can use that quad.
Perfect. So when we're down into this deep position, this as a single leg wall set, really important. We're trying to get good pressure through kind of our midfoot and our heel. We're trying to feel some activation through our buttock as well as that quad. Like Mayhem highlighted, we really want to be loading that quad. This is a great exercise. If we can tolerate this, and it's less than a 3 out of 10, if you do have some knee pain, this can be a great isometric to start to build some tension and tolerance and load the knee in a healthy way, as long as we can do it at a very comfortable level. Ideally, isometrics can actually help to reduce pain if we do them sub-pain. So if you can play with that and find a position, maybe it's a little higher, and you don't have knee pain, but you do feel that quad burn, you do feel that hip burn, that's actually going to be very beneficial in terms of down-regulating the pain response in your knee and helping to basically up-regulate that load management and that strengthening through the actual hip and quad complex. So again, playing with depth is going to be really important depending on knee pain, depending on what you're trying to get from this. Obviously, if you're, say, a park skier or someone who's off-piste that does happen to end up, say, backseat on a landing, or you're really deep into a squat, you need to make sure that you have that strength and that control really deep into those. If you're, say, skiing groomers, more often than not, you're going to be up in a nicer, higher position. So you might find, hey, you know what? I got a real nasty quad burn when I try and ski groomers for a long period of time. This will be a perfect exercise for you to, again, just hang out here, hold that position, go single leg, go double leg, opposite leg, build that tolerance, build that burn, engage with those muscles, and actually, when you feel that shake, when you feel that sort of metabolic byproduct burn, we want to work into that as much as we can, because that's going to allow you to increase your tolerance for when you do hit the slopes. And then that way you can ski more comfortably for longer and enjoy your days a lot better.
Who do we have here, Mahyar?